Last week, we talked about setting expectations for podcast growth. Today, we're going to talk about having the right attitude so that you can move forward with confidence. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I am your award-winning Hall of Fame podcast coach, Dave Jackson, thanking you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, this is where I help you tackle the technology, face your fears, and flatten that learning curve. My website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER, that's LISTENER, when you sign up for either a monthly or yearly membership. Now, if you're like, I'm not really sure about that, Dave, it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And so I'm going to go on a bit of a story here, but trust me, we're talking about podcasting. And if you are new to the show, I play the guitar, and I'm actually not too shabby at it, but here's some things that you may not know. I tried to play the guitar when I was 5, but my fingers were just too small, and this was the thing that drove me nuts, I was left-handed. And when I was 6 or 7, I was really frustrated because I couldn't find any left-handed scissors or a baseball glove. Just everything, it just seemed like, womp, 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 sorry, no fun for you, and you're trying to do arts and crafts in school or whatever, and you're just like, no, okay, well, whatever. Finally, the teacher would come over and cut it for you. It was really embarrassing. It was kind of stupid. And so I remember this happened to be at my church. I was in Mrs. Lewis's second grade class, and it was the last time. I'm like, are you kidding me? Somebody hit all the left-handed scissors. And I just said, that's it. Like, I am not going to be left-handed anymore. This is a pain in the butt, and I'm done with it. And I just started cutting things with my right hand, which wasn't easy when I first started. And I had tried to learn how to play the guitar using books that were made for, you guessed it, right-handed people. And it was like learning how to play the guitar like in a mirror. And so I switched and I started playing right-handed. And this, again, I was probably 6 or 7, so my hands were still too small. My brother had a guitar, and I thought he was cool, and I wanted to be cool. And so by age 11, I had a paper route, and I saved my money and bought a really crappy guitar. I mean, it was horrible. I wish I still had it, but I don't. And I learned a lot of really boring songs. You know, Jimmy Crack Corn and I Don't Care and She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain, all those awesome songs that apparently you think people are going to sing around the campfire, and they would if it was like, I don't know, 1948, but it wasn't. And so my brother was over there playing cool stuff on the radio, and he showed me 2 chords, and by learning these 2 chords, I could play all of the chords all over the neck, and the light bulb kind of started to come on. And then I saved more money from my paper route. And this was more money than I ever had because I really wanted this. And I bought a used Gibson SG guitar. Now, for those of you that are not guitar players, that is the iconic guitar that the guy from AC/DC had played. And so I bought this guitar, and what it did is it changed my attitude about playing the guitar, because anytime I played an AC/DC album, I was like, the notes that he played on that album are somewhere on this guitar. I just had to figure out where it was. It wasn't even a case of like, I can't find it. It's like, no, there's only so many notes on this thing, and I've just got to figure it out note by note. And so I would get home from school, I'd deliver my paper route, I would eat dinner, and probably from 7 o'clock to 11, just about every day, I would be playing the guitar. I had a friend of mine who's still my best friend, and he was learning the guitar. I have cassettes with hours of us just trying to figure out how to play lead guitar, and it's not pretty. And I still, though, I knew the notes were there. I just had to find them. And so podcasting is made up of a few ingredients. and there's nothing stopping you from finding them. If you've listened to the show, you know I say it's part of it is content. So that's you're either educating people or you're entertaining them, or even better, you're doing both. And then you have delivery. So are you trying to make people laugh or cry or think or groan? So it's really content and delivery. Now there's more to it. We'll talk about that as we go along. And there is another ingredient that most people don't talk about. In fact, I don't even really talk about it much, but it is kind of out there, and that is luck. Now, the reason I don't want to bring this up is so many people may look at that one famous person that's a unicorn and go, they just got lucky and I'm not lucky. Well, that's why I don't talk about it, because that's not true. There's the old saying that the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I believe in that. Or there's also the luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And that's very true. I've been in situations where people have said, hey, Jackson, get up there and do the thing. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay. And based on my past experiences, I was able to do whatever they asked me to do. But let's not discount luck. There are people that are, they just happen to be at the right place at the right time. However, you do need to have the skills to grab and hold someone's attention. In today's society, actually, we need to steal someone's attention. There are so many other things that people could focus on. And it's not that we're competing against other podcasters. Yeah, sure. There are people that are, quote, our competition, but there are streaming services, there's sports, there's gaming, there's music, there's books, there's TV, there's a whole lot more, and there's only 24 hours in a day. And so we need to, really make content that just grabs people by the throat. And again, I say this not to make you worried. I want you to understand that when you first start out, things may not grow as fast as you like. I'll be talking about, last week I talked about how I released a new show. I'm going to go, I haven't looked at them yet. We're going to see how far the numbers went up or down from the last episode and talk about growth. But when you first start out, they're just not going to grow as fast as you like, because you want it to be 1 million downloads tomorrow. And so it's not that your show is bad. Your show might actually be good. In fact, it might be very good. But to steal someone's attention, I guess it just needs to be great. And I'll talk about something a little later that I saw, and the minute I saw it, I had to share it online. And when I did that, I was like, okay, why did I just share this? We need to think about this. If you share something with someone, why? Why did you do that? Why is this so good? Because when we understand what makes something good, then we can put that on our trajectory and try to aim at that. I read the book Platform by Michael Hyatt, and he always calls it wow content, that you have to create wow content, and you really have to think about it. When those times when something grabs you, stop and look at it. Now, the one example I want to talk about, and I was just amazed by it. And this is where YouTube discovery did help. And I found this video from Britain's Got Talent, right? And this girl came on named Sydnie Christmas, and she sang the song Tomorrow from the musical Annie. And what was funny about this is as soon as she announced that she was going to sing Tomorrow by Annie, Simon Cowell, the judge that's really harsh and tells people they're awful, he audibly was like, ugh, because he's just heard that song so many times. And so he pauses, or actually she pauses. So they're like, okay, Sydnie, let's hear what you got. And there's a pretty long pause. And they're like, come on, Sydnie. And she even kind of makes a joke. In fact, she had the judges kind of laughing beforehand. But this pause created tension. And you're like, okay, because you just know Simon's ready to just go, ugh, again. And then when she starts to sing, she changes the timing just a little bit. You've heard this song, the sun will come out tomorrow, blah, 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 right? So she changes the timing of that line just a little bit. And the other thing you find out is her singing voice is way different than her talking voice, like way different. So you have a few things catching you that got you hanging on. There are a couple things. Like number one, is Simon going to like it? Is he going to throw something at her? And then the other thing that catches you off guard is like, wait, what is going on with her voice? Holy cow. I'll have links to the video in the episode description. And then she changes the melody ever so slightly so that your brain goes, oh, wait a minute. That's new. It's like if somebody was singing happy birthday and you went, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. You're like, wait, that's not how that is. Like just enough to make you go, wait, what? Now, by the time she gets to the second verse, it sounds like a gospel song. And once again on the chorus, she changed one. I've dissected this video a lot. She changed one note, just enough to keep you engaged. And then she started to let the horses run free. And you now realize, wow, this girl does have talent. And the audience just cannot help but applaud. This is that wow content that you like, I got to share this with someone. And at this point in the song, she owns the song and again, shakes it up by going from belting out the song at the very end. She's just tomorrow, doing that whole thing. And this is just a music thing. They use dynamics. So they went from being very loud to being like almost a whisper at the end. And this is where I say, you have a voice. There are so many things you can do with it. Because when you talk fast, people think there's something coming on and you're being, you can talk fast and it creates tension in it. And then when you do a dramatic pause and you focus on each word, it sounds like you're saying something so important, right? There are things we can do to spice up our message. And so while we all recognize this obnoxious little song, Sydnie made it her own. And I'm sure that is based on her influences somehow, which brings us to our good friend AI. It's funny because in the same way that Kleenex owns facial tissues, ChatGPT is basically, people just say ChatGPT and they mean AI. Or when you say AI, everybody just thinks ChatGPT. But I attended the Content Entrepreneur Expo last week in Cleveland, Ohio. And for the record, that one came out of my own pocket. Most of the events I go to, I'm working for Libsyn. But this one was all me, and I wasn't speaking. I didn't get to go for free. That was money out of my wallet. And at the very end of the show, I'll share something about that. I just went to attend. I was like, wow, my people are there. And I saw the talks that were going on. I'd never been there. And I know Joe Polizzi. I had him on the show. Links in the description. And I was like, it's not always about who I know, but who knows me. And so I went to this event. I didn't have to buy a plane ticket. I didn't have to buy a hotel. The event was about 40 minutes from my house, and I just drove back and forth every day. But before I went to that event, just to let you know, I went to an online event from Podfest about AI. And I just wanted to share this with you because that's why I go to these events. And there are really two schools of thought when it comes to AI. And the one is use AI as an assistant. Use it to brainstorm. Use it to shape your content. And basically, this seems to be the best practice. Hey, come up with certain ideas, and then you take yourself and put it into the content. The second school of thought is where you kind of do very little, and AI does the rest. And that sounds great, right? I'm just going to sit back and let the robots do it. But over and over, I heard how the idea of next to nothing and having AI do everything, including the dishes, I think that's coming, does not necessarily produce wow content. So you want to come up with a wow content and use AI to brainstorm and polish it. And so if you hear someone that's selling you a course for 3 easy payments, and all you have to do is sneeze on the keyboard and money will fall from heaven, I'm not sure I would be down with that. I saw some really interesting things. There was a guy that spoke. He had 6 children, and they were finicky eaters, and he told ChatGPT what was in the fridge. It spit out some recipes to make, and this is the key to AI. This is what I've heard, that you talk to it like a regular person, and he said, yeah, that's kind of bland, and I have somebody who's gluten or whatever the deal was, and it came up with different recipes. Eventually, he told it the floor plan of his supermarket, and it would create recipes, a shopping list, and the shopping list was in the order of the supermarket. So AI is not going away. I don't think it's a fad. I've heard that it is very energy. It eats up a lot of energy. And if it keeps growing at the pace it's growing, we'll all have to turn off the lights so we can have, AI running. And so I get it. I also heard some stat where like every 2 years, it's going to be 5 times more powerful than it was before, something like that. That's probably not accurate, but basically it's getting better and better and better. So I like where it's going, and I can see where it's going to help. But remember, right now, AI cannot share a story about when you were playing the guitar at age 5 or when you did this or that. So those personal stories that can help make a point, use those, because it's going to make you stand out. And it's those things that you can't get other places. And it's those things that surprise people. And it was Sydnie singing, well, she just changed it a little bit, that I went, oh, wait a minute, this is new. This is not your typical. And I think AI by itself is very much typical, because it is actually pulling information from someplace else. And so keep that in mind. Now, I want to share another thing I saw. This was on Reddit. And if you are a listener to my show, Ask the Podcast Coach, this is a bit of a rerun, but I was like, I want to bring this up again. And this person posted this. He says, I'm trying to create my own podcast, but I'm having trouble with my speech and the way I actually want to talk about my topics. So I don't think he's talking so much like he has a stutter or he has a lisp or a cleft palate. I think he's just talking about he's not sure how to frame this. He says, I want to do semi-educational comedy episodes on topics that interest me. My first episode is about a specific Beatle. Now, he's not talking about Ringo, John, Paul, and George here. He's talking about the little critters with, that kind of stuff. He says, so far, my approach for this is basically reading a Wikipedia post, but I don't really like that. Well, I wouldn't either. Wikipedia is not known for its humor. It's known for its facts. And he says, I wanted to try something more akin to people like Casual Geographic and Lindsay Nicole, who is the zoologist. Now, I've never heard of either of these shows, but I get the idea that they must be semi-educational comedy shows. He says, but with my own comedic twist. I see. He wants to be like Casual Geographic, but with a comic twist. So maybe they're not very funny, which would be good. You want to be different than everybody else in some cases. He says, and I want to have it in the form of a podcast on which sometimes I will get guests. And so it sounds like he did an episode and went, well, that's not really what I'm looking for. And to that, I say, congratulations. You tried it. You took a swing. And when I wrote my book, Profit from Your Podcast, Turn Your Listeners into a Livelihood, that thing went through 5 editing phases. They kept sending it for me to approve, and I'd be like, yeah, that's good. Are we done? Can we publish it now? Oh, hold on. And then here's another edit. I was like, what? So I want to stop a second here, and I'm going to throw a couple things at you. And I want you to think about the very first time you did them. All right. So I'm going to name a topic. I want you to take your brain and think about the first time you did it. So tying your shoe. I remember I was in the kitchen. I remember my dad showing me how to do it. And I remember I was pretty awful at it. How about riding a bike? My driveway is a hill. And if you did not understand the braking mechanism when you were riding down the driveway, it doesn't go well. And so, I think we all had a few skinned knees when we learned how to ride a bike. Or do you remember getting behind the wheel of a car with somebody else? In the States, you have to ride around with your parents for a while. And then eventually you get to ride on your own once you get your license. But then, do you remember getting on the freeway alone? Like no parents, it's you. You got to make sure you get on and holy cow, this is so fast. And oh, these cars are so close together, right? We all kind of freak out on that. Or do you remember your very first kiss? Probably weren't that good at it and you got better at it. And that's really what I want to point out here. There are skills that you have continued to get better at and you keep doing them. Hopefully. I hope I'm a better driver than I was when I was 16. But podcasting is no different. So this person is like, yeah, I tried this. It wasn't very funny. Well, okay. And how I do when I talk at places, I try to make my presentations entertaining. And so the bottom line is, what facts do you need to present? And then just go, is there anything I can do to make this funny? Is there a story here that I can inject to make the point? And is the story funny? And then there are books you can read on how to write a joke. It's kind of a formula, but hopefully you have some sort of sense of humor. But keep in mind, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And the bottom line is you have to figure out where do you want to go and then point yourself at that target and keep trying because there are so many pieces to a podcast, right? We talked about content and delivery, but there's also little pieces like length of it, schedule, vibe. You know what I mean by the vibe? Like, is it serious? Is it funny? Is it wacky? Is it adult? What is it? What's your vibe? The delivery of it. Is it cold? And is it someone just reading their podcast to you on the piece of paper that you can hear them in the background going, yes, and this is so much. And you're like, yeah, okay, page 2 is like a very bad version of Paul Harvey. Delivery, the content, the branding. Branding is important. Don't draw your artwork with chalk or crayons. And then there is that thing called luck that in some cases does have something to do with this. So let me tell you about Jen Hardy. She's a new member of the School of Podcasting. I helped her a few months ago kind of get focused on some things, but I don't want to take any credit for Jen because she's just somebody who has been keeping at it. Her niche is kind of women over 50, but she started playing with YouTube. And as I look at her channel, she has over 300,000 views. She has almost 1,500 subscribers. And this is one of those cases where you move things around, you try this, you try that, and all of a sudden you come up with a winning combination. And, if you talk to Jen, she's like, I don't know what's going on, but she does know that now that she found something that's working, she's now doing this hours per day to pour some gas on that fire. And that's amazing. And that's kind of what I'm pointing out here is there are times when you're like, well, maybe I should do a shorter show or a longer show, or maybe I should try to inject some humor, or maybe I should be more serious. Maybe I should start using music beds and making dramatic pauses, or what, there are so many ingredients in your podcast. And I think that's why, for me, being somewhat of a creative person, I like it because I'm not afraid to go, well, let's try this. If you notice here when I put in my ads for the School of Podcasting, sometimes I'll do a tease like, hey, in a second, I'm going to tell you how to do blah, blah, blah. And then the ad rolls in. And then other times I'll just do that thing where it sounds like I'm coming to the end of a story. And then the ad comes in. I'm playing with stuff. And so that's the last point I wanted to make at the Content Entrepreneur Expo. If you want to check it out, it's cex.events. We had BJ Novak, who, if you watched the American version of The Office, was one of the writers, but also he was the temp in the show. And somebody asked him a question. And I was like, oh, that's a good question. Because if you think about it, when you watch your favorite TV show, you have the character, and that character brings a certain something to the show. So, Chandler on Friends was kind of the wacky, he was doing the punchlines a lot. And then you had Phoebe, who was kind of ditzy and, into the whole grandma is a cat kind of thing. And then, right, every person had their role. And he said, how do you deal with that as a writer? Because on one hand, especially if your show is successful and it goes on for a while, you kind of like, oh, I got to write this guy being ditzy again. And Joey's just the dumb jock or whatever. And he said, we found that you could write about 5% out of the normal zone, whatever that is. You could mix it up about 5%. He says, and that way, the people that tuned in because they wanted to see, Joey on Friends be kind of a dumb jock, musclehead kind of guy, they got 95% of that. But the people that are like, I don't know, this show's always the same. If you kind of mix it up about 5%, it wasn't enough to where people are like, this isn't what I wanted, but it was enough to keep them creatively happy. And I was like, that's a really good piece. That's a nugget right there that I wanted to share with you, because if you're looking to mix things up without losing your audience, go about 5%. And then maybe the next episode, you go another 5%. You have to be careful with that. But you can mix things up. It's your art, man. It's my art. But remember that I remember growing up, being a musician, and I was like, man, I wish I could get on the radio, right? I had a band, that whole 9 yards. And eventually I was in a band that we actually wrote some music. And I was like, man, I wish we could get our CD into the record stores. And there was one local record store that, we had a shot at, and they weren't really that interested. And it was like, oh, man. And so there were these limits to where you could put your content out. But right now, you have the exact same opportunity as somebody who works for insert radio program here. You have a global audience that has nothing in its way to reach. You can be on Libsyn or Buzzsprout or Captivate or Blueberry or whoever, and that will get you global. Can we stop on that a second? As in someone, right, when I first started, a guy in Nuremberg, Germany found my show. That's what put gas in my tank. I'm like, wait, that guy's on the other side of the planet. You have global audience, potentially. And granted, there are things like languages that tend to get in the way, but you know what I mean. And then you don't need to have some sort of $1,000 microphone. I'm talking into a microphone. What am I using right now? I'm using the Rode Pod Mic. This is a $200 microphone, and you could use a Samson Q2U. That's right now, I believe, $69, and it sounds just as good. You don't need to spend a gazillion dollars on this stuff. And so you have the same opportunity as anyone. Back in the day when I was a musician, we couldn't catch a break. Now, again, that doesn't mean you quit. It just means you got to start finding the right people and being nice to people who can get your CD into that rack. And you don't have those kind of walled gardens. Spotify keeps building one and then finding out that it doesn't work. But the fact that really there's no limit to what you can do. It's just a matter of hard work. It's a matter of making wow content, promoting that content, getting it in front of the right audience, all these little things that have to kind of be in place for things to really take off. And that's why, if we go back to last week's episode, why people get a little miffed at their podcast not growing as fast as they want. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm going to go look at my numbers because I told you I launched a new podcast last week. Let's do the math and see what kind of numbers we grew with right after this.
The School of Podcasting.
Hey, we got some podcast rewinds coming up as well. So I looked at my stats and I try to set it as the same time frame. And so the previous episode, when I hadn't told anybody, I was getting 32 downloads. Now I told a few people, but I wasn't really out, hey, everybody, I wasn't promoting it on Twitter and such. So I was getting 32 downloads. And then I just looked at the episode, and this one's not really fair because this episode has only been out not even a day yet. But I looked at it, so I'm comparing the first day downloads. And so this one's really kind of getting, you notice how I'm already making excuses? Isn't that funny? Anytime we talk about stats, well, it's kind of like, well, this one's not really, yeah, okay. I got 36 downloads. So you see that and you go, wow, only 30, that's a 12.5, if we round it up, 13% increase. And so now, did I go out and promote this a lot? Nope, I told you about it on my last episode. I've been promoting it on a couple other shows. I did a little social media, but I didn't really grind it out. And I'll take a 13% growth with not really going crazy with it. The other thing, I've been doing a lot with analytics on websites. The website, by the way, the new podcast I'm doing is called Your Podcast Website. And so I've been looking at things like Google Analytics and Fathom Stats and Mouseflow and things like that. And I found that I believe it was 18% of my visitors to my website came from my newsletter. And in theory, right, if the website then promotes the podcast, those people are then going to become, hopefully fans of your show. Now, here's the cool thing. I was lucky enough, I do a live show every Saturday. It's called Ask the Podcast Coach. So if you want some free podcast consulting, come on down. And Craig from Inglea's podcast was nice enough to say, hey, I listened to episode 3, and that really helped me. There were some really good tips in that. That's exactly what you want to hear. That, hey, I think I know what my audience needs. I've seen it. I kind of am not guessing. And I found a guest to give that information. I did a fun NPR style kind of interview of him, and he said, I liked it. So if you think about it, I now have Craig, who, if somebody goes, I don't know, I'm new to this podcast thing, I don't know what kind of website I should get, Craig may actually go, I've got the podcast for you, and then point them at me. And that's why it grows slowly, because hopefully, right, so what is 1 divided by 36, right? That's not a great ratio, but as time goes on, you can go and have another Craig, and then another, maybe it's a Susie or a Sally and something, because, well, actually 1 out of 36 is 3%. And there's that magic 3%, again, that I always talk about. If you want people to take action, plan on 3%. And 1 divided by 36 is 2.7%. And so there's a book that I am listening to called The Compound Effect. And of course, I'll have links to this out in the show notes. There's a part of it called The Magic Penny. And it says, if you are given a choice between taking $3 million in cash this very instant and a single penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days, which would you choose? And to make a long story short, in this example, it says, it keeps doubling and it keeps doubling. And it says after 20 full days with only 11 days left, the person that chose the penny had $5,243. And she's not feeling great. And she took this sacrifice, and she's got her positive behavior, and she is barely more than $5,000. But the person that took 3 million, well, they've got 3 million, and that person has 5,000. They say, but the same small mathematical growth improvement each day makes the compound penny worth $10,737,418 on day 31, more than 3 times that of the 3 million. But it's the fact that it's on the last day that it goes over for that. And so that's why I want you to keep going. Obviously, if you hate your podcast, it drives you crazy, it's causing you mental problems and physical problems, well, then don't do your podcast. But figure out what works, keep going in that direction. Ask your audience for feedback, specific. Don't just go, what do you think? Because they'll go, it's good. Ask them specific things about your show. Speaking of that, in the show notes of this particular episode, you'll see a link where you can leave me feedback on this episode.
In case you missed it, it's time for a podcast rewind.
Hi, this is Matt Kundle, and I just had Dave Jackson on the Soundoff podcast. I figured for episode 400 we would go back to school. In the episode, we talked about why your podcast needs a website. Do you really need to do video if you have a podcast? And what is podcasting 2.0? The episode is out now, and you can listen to it at soundoffpodcast.com.
I really enjoyed that interview with Matt, and I'll have links to that out in the show notes. But when he said episode 400, I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. And I said, you got some lessons you've learned probably over those episodes. And he's like, oh, absolutely. So you'll hear Matt on this show in the future. If you'd like to have me appear on your podcast, I love to do interviews. Go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact. Remember, the notes are there. You just got to find them. Keep at it, especially if you're having fun and you are moving forward in the right direction. Keep moving. Remember, make it your own. You could be the next Sydnie Christmas. Go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/931 because today is episode number 931. You can check out that video along with everything else that I mentioned. And going back to the beginning of me learning the guitar, I was lucky enough to have a mentor. That was my brother. He showed me 2 chords and the light bulb came on and we were off to the races. And I would love to be that mentor for you to go, ooh, you just need to adjust this or that, or maybe you're using the wrong equipment or whatever tool you're using, or maybe your content just needs a little polish. I would love to be that person for you. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you need help with this, you know where to find me, right? Schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER. That'll save you on either a monthly or yearly subscription that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and access to step-by-step courses, unlimited. Unlimited. And by that, I mean there's no limits to the consulting. You can get me and you, not some staff member, me and you together, helping you shape your show along with an amazing community. Check it out, schoolofpodcasting.com. And until next week, take care. God bless. Class is dismissed. Hey, this is Future Dave. I was listening to this and I realized I said I'll tell you more about that in the future, and then I didn't. But this is just a feel-good story. On Saturday, I stuffed my wallet into a bag under my bike and I went riding around the neighborhood. I woke up Sunday and went to go to church, and I was like, hey, that's weird. My wallet's usually on my desk, and it's not. And I went out to the shed because I remembered it was in my bike bag, opened up the shed, and there's my bike. And the whole bag had fallen off my bike. So I retraced my steps around the neighborhood, wasn't there. Long story short, I come back to my house and someone had found my bag with my wallet in it, got my address off my driver's license, and put the whole bag back kind of in between my outside door and my inside door, and they didn't touch a thing. And I had everything in my wallet. So the lesson learned here is, A, I guess check the straps on your bag, maybe not ride with earbuds so you can hear when it falls off. And number 2, keep one credit card out of your wallet, because I actually went to an event in Cleveland and kind of couldn't go because I could not park in downtown Cleveland without a credit card. But just the fact that someone found my wallet, I think there was a whopping $27 in it, and they returned it untouched, gave me faith that, you know what, the world isn't quite the scary, spooky, awful place that the news leads me to think. And if for some strange reason you are the person that found my wallet and brought it back, thank you, thank you, thank you.